You ready?
Absolutely. Let's go.
Okay. Hello and welcome back to the KCCMH Connection. When emergencies happen in a rural community, there's no giant team waiting around the corner. It takes preparation, teamwork, and people who are willing to answer the call at any hour of the day. Today's guest knows that world really well, whether it's serving on the trauma team, helping lead emergency preparedness efforts at the hospital, or moonlighting with the local ambulance service. Cody has seen rural emergency care from nearly every angle. We're excited to have him on the show today and to talk about the realities of emergency response in rural healthcare. Cody, thanks for being here. Can you start by telling us about your healthcare background?
Yeah, so I've been in EMS since 2009 when I got my EMT basic. And in 2018, I went to paramedic school at Ames Community College in just outside of Greeley. And so since then, I've been a paramedic, and I started here at the hospital about 5 years ago. And about the same time, I ended up starting on the ambulance here, and ended up transitioning to a full-time position here, and then again transitioned to emergency preparedness in the trauma program. So I do that part-time, and I work every other weekend in the emergency room here at the hospital, and been doing that for the last about year and a half. So been doing it a while.
Yeah, and so it sounds like you stay busy with all things emergency.
Yes.
So what is it about emergency medicine that keeps you coming back even on the hardest days?
Yeah, I've definitely been doing this a while, and, it kind of fell into my lap initially. I really, through high school and everything, didn't really have an interest in it, if you will, but it fell into my lap, and so I started in the fire service, and so every call that we go on is a little different. You never know what it's gonna be. Same thing goes for the hospital. You never know what's gonna walk through the doors. It's a little different every day, and so through time I've just kind of become comfortable in those situations, and so it's definitely a calling. It's not for everybody, but I thoroughly enjoy it. So.
Okay, Cody, so for people that don't know, what makes rural EMS and rural emergency different from a big system?
Definitely transport times is a big difference between rural and up on the city. A lot of the city services might have a 5 to 10 minute transport time for their patients, and there's times where we can have our patients for over an hour. And so you have to be, very well faceted in what comes next. It's very common in the city to only get through 1 or 2 interventions, and out here you might get through 6, 7, 8 interventions. And so knowing what comes next, and not having to rely so much on the hospital, right? So I was always taught that when you're showing up to the hospital, if they do something that you could have done within the first 10 minutes, then that's a learning point for you. And so you need to take that back and try to make sure that the next time that doesn't happen. And so it's very common to not get through hardly anything by the time you get the patient to the hospital up in the city. So.
And so by interventions, you mean that's like giving an IV or giving medications?
Correct. Yep.
And so like you're saying, in the city, if you're around the block, that's not happening.
Yeah, you're pretty much going to pick the patient up. You're lucky to get one set of vital signs and show up at the ER. And out here, it's very different. We're way far away, and we've got to stabilize those patients to give them a chance to get to the hospital. So,
So moving to your next hat,
yeah.
What exactly does an emergency preparedness coordinator do at a rural hospital?
Yeah, so when I took over for emergency preparedness here at the hospital, the first step was to do a hazard vulnerability assessment, which is an HVA. So we look at all the possible hazards that are present in our area, and then we look at things that we're doing to mitigate those hazards, and make those hazards lower on our list. And then we look at how many times those hazards have occurred over the last couple years. And so eventually, through a tool, we end up coming up with our top 10. And so my job was to look at those top 10 and so really focus on this last year on what those top 10 hazards are and doing things to get those things lower so that our next time that we do an HVA, which will be this year, that those things aren't still on our top 10. There's going to be some things like weather that we can't do a whole lot about that are going to probably continue to be on those things, but things like workplace violence, active threats, things like that, we can do a lot of stuff to help mitigate those threats. And so I look at those, and then also making sure that our training with the staff is up to date, making sure that they understand what to do in an emergency, making sure that that information is easily available to them. And so we devised some quick flip books that have all the main threats that we identified and basically the things that they need to do in the first 5 minutes. And then we also have an emergency operations plan that we developed that is an encompassing document that covers just about everything that we could encounter through an emergency. And it's never ending. So, we got done with this last piece and now it's getting ready to reset. And so there's always something to do with emergency preparedness and making sure that we're ready. So
I think when some people think about emergency preparedness, they think of big disasters.
Correct.
And you did mention workplace violence. What are some other day-to-day, year-round emergencies that you prepare for?
So, disasters are a big one because that's the thing that, people always are concerned about. But we also have to, understand that the utilities at a hospital are a big component, right? So, if we have a flood or the power goes out or, our kitchen shuts down, that's a emergency to be able to take care of patients. And so we have to look at, what we're going to do if, one of those components goes down. And so we devised, it's called a 96-hour plan. And so that 96-hour plan looks at every one of our utilities and the layout of our hospital, and it determines how long we can last on that particular utility through 96 hours. And so if we do have any one of those incidents, like a big disaster or just one of those things goes out, we know when we have to start looking at how are we going to start managing that, at what time. So is that 12 hours? Is that 24? Is that 36? Or is that 90? We're good for 96. And so some of those things, are going to reach us faster than others. And so we have to have plans in place to make sure that that we can still offer the service to our community. So if anything happens, really.
Yeah. So one of the recurring themes of this podcast is the building itself and how it creates a lot of challenges. Do you find that in your planning that, because I like to call it the Franken building, all these different years patched together, does that create
absolutely
hoops for you?
Yeah, no, definitely it became very evident to me when we were doing that 96-hour plan. Because we have a lot of variables. Some make us in a better position than others because we might have a natural gas generator, and we also have a diesel generator. So, but those two things take care of two different parts of the building, and it's not one then the next. And so, a lot of facilities have redundancy in their emergency plan. But it makes it really hard here because, we have a lot of different variables. And so, we try, the newest edition has its own problems and as well as the older editions. And so it definitely throws wrenches in the mix when we're looking at all the different, the lifeblood of our building. So,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So what's one thing the public would probably be surprised to learn about emergency preparedness planning?
Let's see. That's a good question. I kind of talked about it, what we're prepared for today, right, could completely change next week. And so it's never ending. you kind of have to be a tinfoil hat guy, to kind of worry about these things. And so we learn things from every incident that we have. And so, we might have an incident where we had flooding. And so we take a look at that from all the departments. Every department head kind of chips in and says, hey, this is what we experienced. And so then we try to adjust that plan for the next time. And every incident's kind of a test of our plan. And so we have to be able to adapt very quickly, and make sure that by the time that this next incident happens, that we're better prepared for that. So it's just a completely evolving problem that there's really never an end.
Yeah.
So.
And I would say maybe that a surprise would be people don't understand that there's really no small incident. Like,
right.
I saw a flood happen in the hallway, just a pipe was hit, and every piece of drywall that got wet had to be cut out
Correct.
and replaced because we can't risk mold in the hospital.
Yeah.
So there's really no small incident.
Yeah, I mean, and then it takes a long time to mitigate that, right? And so, and it's very disruptive to all of the departments that are taking place. A flood might not happen in the ER, but it's affecting the ER because they have to shut down power to an area, and so we're on generator, and not everything in the ER is on emergency generator. So, it definitely, there's not a small incident that doesn't greatly affect all operations at the hospital. So,
Ripple effect.
absolutely.
So you're also on the trauma team. What does teamwork look like during a critical trauma situation?
Yeah, so, we have a very strong trauma team at this hospital. We have great support from administration. We have great support from our trauma medical director, trauma nurse coordinator, the assistant, our CNO. We have been meeting biweekly for the last 2.5 years. And it's been really cool to see our trauma program evolve. So, we have a trauma come in, and we try our best to provide the best possible care for our patients. And then our trauma team really looks at the after effects. And so we take a look at that case from start to finish and identify anything that we can do better. And then as a team, we work to try to understand how we're going to make that process better, and then we implement it. And then we also go back and look at any time that I encounter a similar incident to make sure that we are improving on that. And so, a lot of we're pretty blessed because we're on top of it. We are usually about 2 weeks after an incident. We're already starting to pull that case and start to review it. And a lot of, bigger facilities, it's harder for them to do that because they have so many, right? So they might be 1.5 to 2 months, after the fact, trying to take a look at that case. And so they've lost the momentum, I think, in a lot of aspects. And so we all have different perspectives, and, it honestly is a pretty enjoyable process. And none of us take it personally, whether we were invested in that case or not. We just try to put the patient first and make sure that we're offering the best trauma care that we possibly can. And so, it takes everybody. And everybody kind of brings up their concerns, and then we start to talk about them and make sure that we implement all those changes across the continuum of care. So
would you say then that continuous improvement is a priority in your department?
Wholeheartedly, yeah. And I think in all of our departments, I've been fortunate to work at other facilities in the past, and some big, some small. And I feel like that at KCCMH, we definitely strive for perfection. We're never going to achieve perfection, but we definitely every department tries to put forth their best process and do what we can to get there. And so
just keep getting better.
Absolutely. Every day. So I definitely feel like there's a lot of good teamwork, and it definitely helps the patients in our community. So.
Absolutely. So can you tell us What's unique about handling trauma cases in a rural area where transfer times can be longer?
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're 2.5 hours maximum by ground from a level 1 trauma facility, and we're over an hour by air. And there's a thing in trauma, it's called the golden hour. The golden hour means like from the time of the incident, they need to be at a surgeon within an hour, or their mortality greatly reduces. And so it makes it very hard when you're an hour plus by air to getting them to a trauma surgeon. And so we've become very good at stabilization, right? That's our main goal. The patient comes into our facility, whether it be by EMS, by personal vehicle, however that patient may show up. We need to identify the patient and then start to try to stabilize this patient, and start working on transfer. And being out in the plains, I mean, I'm sure a lot of the listeners understand that, we have a lot of weather. We can't always rely on flights. And so it makes things very difficult. There's times where we have patients that we can't get out because highways are closed. Courts flights are all grounded. And so it definitely gets difficult, and we definitely try our best. We have great emergency care providers here that do our best, to not only stabilize, but then we become the ICU. And so we might have to keep these patients for several hours before we can get ground transport capability to Denver. There's been times where we've tried to think outside the box and get them west or east into Kansas, if that makes our transport times faster. Whatever it takes to get those patients to the highest level of care. So, yeah.
So you also moonlight with the Carson County Ambulance Service, which is,
yes, ma'am.
Which is awesome. So how does being on both pre-hospital and the hospital side help you provide care?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that I have always kind of done pre-hospital care, and then I started with pre-hospital, and then I went into the hospital, and there's definitely two worlds, right? But you can kind of meld the two together, right? And so I understand what we're going to be doing at the hospital, and so it helps me in the pre-hospital side to make sure that I'm starting to work towards that, so that and passing information, right? And so I know the information that I would want to know if I was working in the emergency room.
Oh, yeah.
And so I can get that information to whoever is working in the emergency room quicker, so they can start to devise a plan for this patient quicker. And so, I see probably a lot more patients through the ER than I do as, pre-hospital. But I think that they kind of go hand in hand, and just understanding which hat you're wearing that day, and making sure that our newer EMTs and paramedics that are starting out at our pre-hospital service here in Kit Carson, that they're trained correctly, and that they learn from my experience, and kind of passing it along to them. And so, yeah, like I said, I think that they really go hand in hand and complement one another. So
I do think it's kind of neat that you probably feel really great about who you're handing your patient off to.
Correct.
Here because you're teammates.
Yeah.
And that sometimes EMS providers, they don't get follow-up on their patient to know the outcome,
Correct.
Not just because you want to know if your interventions were successful, but, you create a relationship with that person.
Absolutely.
In a tough scene, and you're just like, I wonder what happened to them. So is that
Yeah.
kind of cool that you maybe get some of that follow-up?
I've transported patients to other facilities before, and you drop them off and have no idea what's happening. It's such a big system that it's hard to get that information to kind of be passed backwards through the continuum to the little guys, the pre-hospital providers, right? And so working here, we strive to get that information, because that's how you learn. If you miss something that it was a big deal pre-hospital, it's good to be able to teach you that that was there, and do it relatively quickly, right, before you start to forget, right? Because, pretty soon, if you're 2 months in, you've already touched, 50 other patients. And so trying to get that information back quickly, and we do that very well. And I think understanding from both sides, I try extra hard to get that information back to our pre-hospital providers. And within the last 6 months, we've started to include the directors and whatever pre-hospital providers want to participate in our trauma meetings. They can come in and get feedback from the trauma team as a whole and learn. And so I feel like that we're only making our trauma system stronger by incorporating our pre-hospital providers in that as well. So
yeah.
Yeah.
So I know that for a little while there was some kind of misconceptions or misunderstandings about transferring and transfer times and what the ambulance was able to do.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that partnership has strengthened and that?
I do. I think that that's super hard, right? Because I understand from both sides. Our pre-hospital ambulance service is responsible solely for 911 coverage, right? And so we have to make sure that we're able to get a crew out for 911, not only in Burlington, but also in Stratton. And so then in addition, then you have to try to get a crew together for a transfer. And so when you don't have a lot of ALS providers to choose from, it makes things a lot more difficult. And so, we might have a paramedic available for the transfer, but we don't have another, member able to step up and take one at that point in time. And so we're not able to take the 911 crew to take that transfer. Yeah. So that definitely makes things more difficult. And I feel like over the last several months that we've really tried to focus on that and get more ALS providers in, making sure that we're staffing it, so that we can get those transfers out. And not just relying on a group of individuals to take those transfers. Yeah. We're spreading those out so that people don't become burnt out, and also getting both sides of it, right? Because you have inter-facility transfers and you have 911 coverage, and so those you've got to be able to do both of those. And so I think that we've really focused on that, and I definitely feel like over the last couple of months that we've greatly improved being able to take ground transports out of this hospital. So
yeah, and I think maybe what people don't understand is that 2 hours to Denver and 2 hours back, it's not a 4-hour transfer. It usually ends up
6 hours minimum.
Yeah.
is what the by the time you get to the hospital, get patients packaged, that's usually 30 to 45 minutes there. And so then you add the 2 hours to Denver minimum, and then another hour, ish to make sure you get your patient handoff to the other facility, get restocked, get refueled. Usually, if you're up there at a meal time, trying to grab something to eat, so you're taking care of yourself. And then by the time you get back, it's usually about a 6-hour turnaround time. So that's a lot of time, especially if you're not planning on that transfer. It would be great if we knew, okay, at 2:00 today, we're going to have an interfacility transfer. Sometimes that does happen, with a planned transfer, like a return back to our hospital. We'll know a day or so ahead of a time, and it's really easy to get those out. But it's the drop of the hat, the one that you're not prepared for. Yeah, and they tend to happen. When you've got plans within your organization, like, oh, we've got this training that we're trying to do, and all of a sudden, bam, a transfer drops, and you're trying to figure it out. And so, it's not easy for any of the 911 or interfacility companies out here on the Eastern Plains. It's something that all the agencies struggle with, and I wish that there was, a better answer, but I think we're working on it. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So EMS and emergency teams often use humor to cope, right? Just part of the lifestyle.
Yeah.
Is there a funny or memorable only in rural healthcare moment you can share with us?
Yeah, let me think about that for a second. Yeah, so and this actually isn't my story, but it's just one that comes to my head. So it was this last winter. We were lucky enough to get a fixed wing crew out of Kansas to come pick up a patient that we were trying to transfer out. And it was kind of surprising. We're like, whoa, we're actually going to get a fixed wing. We're going to get this patient out. And so the 911 crew came over to do the flight. And so they have to come to the hospital or go out to the airport, pick up the flight crew, bring them to the hospital, offload the patient, then they take the flight crew back to the airport, offload the patient onto the airplane, and then the airplane takes off. And so they're sitting out there. Of course, it's super cold. They end up helping get the patient onto the airplane, and they're sitting there and they're watching the airplane go down the runway, and then they have to turn around and then they come back to take off, and all of a sudden they just see the lights disappear off of the runway. And so all of a sudden their phones are ringing, and they're like, dispatch, why is dispatch calling us? And they're like, so the airplane slid off the end of the runway, and they're wanting to know if you could come out and help them push the plane back onto the runway. And they're like, are you serious? And they're like, yeah. And so the EMS crew went out there and pushed the plane back onto the runway, and they were able to take off and get the patient to Denver. But I just thought that was a pretty funny moment. So.
Gosh. And that's just so pre-hospital.
It is.
You don't
it
know
is.
what's going to happen.
You have zero clue. Nothing is routine. There's always something that's going to throw a wrench in the mix, and we just have to be able to adapt and overcome. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what's one thing you wish every community member understood about rural healthcare workers?
Yeah. So I think, and this has been a problem since the end of time, is that there's different levels of pre-hospital care. You start off as an emergency medical responder, and a lot of those are drivers. They're they're very basic knowledge, but they're capable of assisting, if you will. And then you have your EMT basic, and that's a summer program, so you build on your EMR, and these are all kind of stair steps. And then paramedic is a year program. It's very intensive. You're basically a emergency room on wheels. And so it takes a lot of time to, away from family, away from everything. It's a lot of time, a lot of money. And so, I feel like a lot of people think paramedic and just think that it's an encompassing term, when really, that's one of the top levels of emergency medicine or emergency medical services, pre-hospital. And so, unfortunately, not every call is a ALS, an advanced life support call. A lot of our calls are basic life support, an EMT can handle. But again, you can't really plan for that, right? And so the next call might very well be a critical advanced life support call. And so it's important for the community to understand that, volunteerism is over, and that's just an unfortunate, thing that has happened, with the cost of living, everything, our younger members of society are having to, we can't volunteer our time. We have a family to support. We have to make sure that we're taking care of our family. And so we can't just go run on the ambulance for free, right? And so, it's going to become a point in time where we're going to have to decide what kind of service that we want to offer. If you decide that you just want a basic life support service and you can just do basic stuff, and that might very well mean if you're having a heart attack that crew cannot interpret an ECG, a 12 lead, and so they might not recognize that that's occurring, and so then your time is just getting reset. And if you're willing to furnish an ALS service that has an ALS provider on every single call, whether it be in our facility or 911. It takes money, but you're going to be able to have that service in your community. That early recognition, we can give medicine, pretty much any medicine that they give in the ER. ALS provider, a paramedic can give those meds in an emergency and start your care faster, and so you drastically decreases your mortality, and so it's kind of, you get what you pay for, and so I hope that as a community that we recognize that we need to be doing things to try to make sure that we have a paramedic on every single call, and so as a community, figuring out ways that we can make that happen. It doesn't have to just be one person, paying for a 911 call through their insurance, right? It can be a lot of different things. And so I would hope that our community would want that service. So.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that you just hope that we can figure out how to make EMS more robust.
Absolutely.
It's out here especially,
yeah,
long transport times.
Yeah, we're a long ways from a lot of different things. So, and of course, when you move out to it or you're born in an area like this, you don't ever think about that until it's your family member, right, that's having the emergency. And so you want them to get better. And so, we as a region need to start to share resources and, get people training and figuring out, how we can, make sure that on an interfacility, one service might be able to provide a driver and an ambulance, and another service might be able to provide a paramedic, just thinking outside the box to make sure that we're making sure that our patients are put first and get the care that they deserve. So.
And back to the comment about volunteering, because
yeah.
That used to be a big part of
Huge.
Our community was volunteer EMTs, and I
Yeah.
know they still exist.
Yeah.
But I think what maybe people don't understand about that is the liability of a healthcare provider.
Yeah.
And that you have to be training all the time, you have to be doing your skills competencies,
Yeah.
you have to understand the changing policies and procedures and rules. And so it requires way more time than just showing up to a call and taking care of a patient.
Yeah, that's a huge component of it, right? And life circumstances. Somebody might all of a sudden go get their EMT. They're running, they're practicing, they're training, and then all of a sudden, something happens in their life, and so they end up having to step away to deal with whatever it is that they're having to deal with. And so then that cert lapses, right? You have to have so much training to renew that certification every 3 years. And so, and then that's a whole lot of work to go right back through it. And so I feel like that those sorts of things also influence the volunteerism and just, giving up your life for 12 hours, like being just in Burlington for 12 hours, being ready to respond on a call is a lot, especially if you have kids and, they have sporting events and so there's a lot of complications that go into, being a, volunteer EMT on a service. And a lot of, you work hard to get your EMT and so then, and you love it and you want to, be paid to do that. And so, if that service isn't, going to pay you to do it, then you're going to find another service that's willing to do it. And so then that's pulling those resources out of those communities. And so I feel like that we need to try to keep, grow our own here, keep them happy here, make sure that they're fulfilled here and then passing it on to the youth, right? And making sure that our youth are getting involved. Because this is never going to end, right? This is going to be something that keeps going on. There's always going to be emergencies, and you want to make sure that the people that are showing up to your door are trained and very well versed with what's happening and can handle that emergency. And so, I just really hope that we continue to foster that type of growth in our community and making sure that we're bringing those and keeping our providers here. So
yeah, high quality healthcare close to home, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So to wrap it up, at the end of the day, what keeps you passionate about serving this community?
Because I think one of the biggest things is I live here, my family's here, right? And so I never know when I'm going to need to access that 911 or ER visit. And so I really feel like that that keeps me focused, that, making sure that I'm on top of my game for everyone else so that whoever, and I pass that information along so that whoever shows up in my emergency is also well versed in that. And is comfortable in those situations. And so I definitely feel like that is a passion, and it's been a passion of mine for a long time. And I don't feel like that the flame has ever decreased. It's always just gotten brighter as I've kind of made it through, an EMR, firefighter, EMT, and then into a paramedic. And now I'm working on my critical care paramedic, which is essentially what they do on a helicopter or a fixed wing jet, is the care that they provide there. And so, it just keep working through those things. It's kind of like a well of knowledge, right? As soon as that well starts to get low, it's time to get something else to kind of keep you going. And so, and I also greatly enjoy education, and so being able to teach that also makes me a better provider. And so, yeah, it keeps me motivated and to passing, all that stuff along. So,
yeah. Well, I'm glad that it sounds like being rural, you're having a lot of opportunity to continue growing.
Yep.
Which I think people might think is kind of opposite. Oh, it's a small place.
Yeah.
You've reached the top. Now, I hear there's always another hat to wear and
Yep.
another skill to learn.
Absolutely. I agree.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Cody, thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk to us. And anything else you want to leave us with?
No, I appreciate you having me on. It's been interesting. I hope that I didn't ruin it for you. So.
No way. All right. Thank you again,
Thank you.
everybody, for joining us on the KCCMH Connection, where we are connecting you to the real stories here at the Kit Carson County Memorial Hospital. See ya.
See ya. Thank you, ma'am.